Gameloft, once the king of mobile gaming. If you owned a phone in the early 2000s or 2010s, chances are you played one or several of their games. They were the pioneers of premium mobile gaming, pushing out some of the most impressive titles ever seen on phones. But today, they're barely a shadow of what they once were. But what exactly happened? How did Gameloft rise to dominate mobile gaming, and why did they fall off as hard as they did? Today we're gonna dive into the story of Gameloft, the best mobile game studio that isn't anymore. Gameloft was founded in 1999 by none other than Michael Guillemot?
Guillemot.
Alright, I'm just gonna go with the English, Guillemot. I'm sorry, Michael. But anyways, Gameloft was founded by Michael, one of the co-founders of Ubisoft. His goal? To bring high-quality gaming experiences to mobile devices, something that was practically unheard of at the time. Keep in mind that this was the era of Nokia brick phones and flip phones, when mobile games were mostly just pixelated time wasters like Snake. No shade towards these classics though. But Gameloft had bigger ambitions than these pixel games. Their early success came from creating Java-based mobile games, which were way more advanced than anything else on the market. They specialized in bringing console-like and PC-like experiences to mobile, often making unofficial mobile adaptations of the big trendy games. And they didn't just dabble in one genre. Gameloft made an adaptation of pretty much every genre. Racing games, shooters, RPGs, platformers, you name it. If it was fun, they found a way to make a mobile version of it. Now, if you're familiar with Gameloft, I want to ask you a quick question. Do you have any experiences with their games? And do you have maybe a favorite game of theirs? I can say right now that I played so many of their games when I was a kid, and two of my absolute favorites were Nova 3 and Heroes of Order and Chaos. Easily some of the top games for me. Enter the golden age of Gameloft. If we fast forward to the late 2000s and early 2010s, this is where Gameloft really hit its peak. By this time, smartphones were becoming more and more powerful, and the amount of people with a smartphone was growing exponentially. And Gameloft noticed this and took full advantage. Their games looked and played better than ever before. Some of their biggest titles from this era include the Asphalt series, the definitive mobile racing experience. These games were not just fun, but visually impressive for their time. If you had a phone, you either played Asphalt, have tried downloading it before, or knew someone who played it. Modern Combat, basically a Call of Duty-like first-person shooter for mobile, it had surprisingly good gunplay and even an online multiplayer mode, something rare for mobile shooters back then. The Nova series, a sci-fi FPS heavily inspired by Halo, it had an actual campaign, a decent story, and a solid multiplayer. This was easily one of the most fun games you could have back in the day. I still remember this one game from it where it's basically one-shot kill. You had these alien laser guns. It was so good. This game was peak. We have the Dungeon Hunter series, their version of Diablo, bringing dungeon crawling RPG action to mobile gamers, and Heroes of Order and Chaos, a full-on MMORPG that was basically League of Legends or Dota for mobile, something that felt impossible at the time. And then we also have the Gangster series, a GTA clone for mobile, complete with open-world crime gameplay. At their peak, Gameloft had a reputation for pushing mobile games to their limits. Their games were premium, meaning you paid up front but got a full-fledged experience with no ads or microtransactions. This was back when mobile gaming still felt like a real gaming platform, not just a microtransaction hellscape, and a time where you could actually play a game without being interrupted by ads every 5 seconds. But eventually everything changed. The mobile gaming market shifted, and as free-to-play games started dominating, Gameloft realized they had to start making changes. Games like Clash of Clans, Candy Crush, and Temple Run showed that the real money was in microtransactions and ad revenue. Suddenly, premium mobile games weren't as appealing to publishers. People weren't willing to pay $5 or $10 upfront for a game when they could download something else for free instead. And being an iPad kid in the peak era of Gameloft, I can say that most of the games that I played from Gameloft and on the iPad in general were free ones. You obviously don't have your credit card at this point, and I never really wanted to ask my parents for money. So most of the games I played were always free ones. Back in the day when the App Store was divided into 3 sections, and on the left side you had games that cost money, and in the middle you had free games. I would always scroll down the middle column. I would barely ever glance at the paid games once. Gameloft saw the writing on the wall and tried to adapt. They started shifting their focus to free-to-play models, but it didn't go as well as they had expected. Their games became riddled with microtransactions and pay-to-win mechanics, frustrating longtime fans. For example, Dungeon Hunter 5 lost the depth and replayability that made its predecessors so great. Earlier games in the series had large explorable levels, skill trees, and deep loot systems that rewarded progression. In contrast, Dungeon Hunter 5 introduced an energy system that limited how much you could play before having to wait for the bar to recharge or pay to instantly recharge it. Weapons and armor were now tied to loot boxes and upgrade timers, turning what was once a rewarding RPG into a frustrating grind unless you spent money. Similarly, Modern Combat 5 suffered when it switched to free-to-play. Unlike its predecessors, which offered a solid single-player campaign with a one-time purchase, Modern Combat 5 locked progression behind a leveling system that could be sped up with microtransactions. Players had to deal with timers on multiplayer matches, premium currency for better gear, and a general sense that the game was designed around making money rather than being fun. This was a huge shift from Modern Combat 4, which had a full-fledged campaign and a balanced multiplayer experience right from the start. And to make things worse, competition was growing fast. Mobile gaming was evolving and more developers were jumping in. Companies like Supercell and Tencent were making massive hits, and Gameloft struggled to keep up. Their new games weren't bad by any means, they just weren't special anymore. They felt like cash grabs, lacking the heart and innovation that once defined Gameloft's work. And eventually things would go from bad to even worse when Gameloft's ownership changed hands, which can largely be considered as the final nail in their coffin. In 2016, Vivendi, man, what's up with these names? Vivendi, a massive media conglomerate, took over the company after a hostile takeover. Michael Guillemot and his family, who controlled Gameloft, openly opposed the acquisition, arguing that Vivendi had no real interest in gaming and was simply trying to increase its media influence. Despite their resistance, Vivendi aggressively bought shares in Gameloft until they gained majority control, forcing the Guillemot family out of the company. This wasn't the first time Vivendi had done something like this. Around the same time, they were also trying to take over Ubisoft in a similar fashion, but Ubisoft managed to fight them off. The Guillemot family's departure from Gameloft was a huge blow because they were the ones driving the company's vision and innovation. Once they were gone, Gameloft's decline accelerated. Vivendi had a reputation for prioritizing profits over creativity, and it showed. Under their control, Gameloft started churning out more generic, microtransaction-heavy mobile games with little originality. They shifted away from the premium experiences that built their reputation and instead focused on maximizing revenue. Games became repetitive, filled with in-app purchases, and lacked the charm that once made Gameloft special. It was clear that Vivendi wasn't interested in making great games. They just wanted to milk the mobile gaming market for as much money as possible. So what exactly happened to Ubisoft? They were once the best mobile game studio, pushing boundaries and creating some of the most beloved mobile games ever. But they failed to adapt properly to the changing industry. Instead of finding a way to evolve without losing their identity, they abandoned what made them special in favor of chasing the trends of the market. And they lost their audience in the process. Could they ever make a comeback? Maybe. If they return to making high-quality premium experiences, they might be able to carve out a niche again. And with the current state of mobile games, God knows the players need some actual quality again. But for now, Gameloft is a reminder that no matter how big a game studio is, if they don't adapt the right way, they can fall just as easily and fast as they rose. It seems like they are testing their skills on the console market, so maybe we'll start seeing their impacts there. As someone who played a lot of Gameloft games, especially Nova and Heroes of Order and Chaos, it truly makes me sad to go on the App Store and no longer be able to download these gems any longer. I would give anything to go back to 2014 and play these games at that time again. But for now, they'll just have to stay as memories. If you enjoyed the video, it would mean a lot to me if you could leave a like or subscribe, as it helps me greatly. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. See ya.